Banjo-Kazooie is one of my favorite games of all time. Unfortunately though, I didn't and still don't care very much for its sequel, and I'm not even gonna get into the game that came after that. The series hasn't had an entry in over 10 years. Some would argue 20, despite the fans begging for it. You know what comes next, right? Whenever a beloved series is dormant for too long, ROM hackers come in to pick up the slack. With the advent of a utility called Banjo's Backpack, a level editor tailor-made for creating Banjo-Kazooie levels, the floodgates are open now, and there's a bunch of Banjo-Kazooie ROM hacks that you can play to get your banjo fix. So today, let's take a look at some of the mods I checked out. So I'm gonna start this off with something a little different than anything else I'll be covering in this video. While all the other games I'm covering today are gonna be hacks of the original Banjo-Kazooie game, this one is actually a hack of the original Legend of Zelda for the NES. It's called The Legend of Banjo, and it's basically a total overhaul of the original Zelda game, save for most of the overworld assets. All the sprites have been completely redrawn, and all items are not only redrawn and renamed, but typically obtained differently. All the music is now 8-bit renditions of Banjo-Kazooie music, and the entire overworld map as well as dungeons have been completely redesigned from the ground up. Also, Kazooie is your sword. This is as much a literal third quest that actually offers more content than the actual Zelda second quest, as much as it is a Banjo-inspired hack. They even provided a viewable overworld map PNG, much like the map that came with the original Zelda one. And this helps a lot considering this is a brand new game and I have no idea which dungeon is supposed to be tackled in which order. It also has a new story to go along with it, and much like the original game, waiting at the title screen will eventually see the screen start scrolling and briefly explain the plot, as well as a quick breakdown of all the items. It kinda sorta follows the plot of Banjo, but instead of using 2D as a means to obtain beauty, Gruntilda straight up just decides she's gonna eat her, and now you have to go after her and save her before that happens. There isn't all that much to say other than this is really well done, and if you're a fan of Banjo-Kazooie and also Zelda 1, this is definitely worth checking out. I will say though, quick warning, a few comments that people left on romhacking.net noted that the game doesn't save. I don't know whether or not this has been fixed since, but I will say you should probably utilize save states just in case. And you might as well, because this is actually a little bit harder than Zelda 1. Not to mention, extra life points aren't obtained upon beating bosses and instead are found around the overworld, making it just a little bit harder than it needs to be. So yeah, just use save states. Now on to the actual Banjo hacks. Banjo-Kazooie Cross Donkey Kong Country is a short but sweet mod that lets you play through jungle hijinks from the original Donkey Kong Country. The level geometry itself is extremely basic, but it still manages to pack in a pretty hefty amount of nods and references. There are still notes and honeycombs to collect, but no jiggies to be found. Instead, there's one collectible golden banana, but it's hidden in a secret location that's not immediately obvious unless you pay close attention. DK's house is fully explorable, and like I said before, there's tons of nods and references that make what would otherwise be a pretty lackluster mod into something pretty fun to look around and explore. There isn't really a whole lot you can do with this concept, and obviously it wasn't meant to be something very fleshed out, but it's a fun little mod and a nice homage to the beginning of Rare's golden age. Overall, the gameplay itself isn't all that fun, and some wonkiness does exist in terms of controlling a character on a 2D stage built inside of Banjo-Kazooie's engine, but searching for all the little Easter eggs is what makes this hack enjoyable. The stage itself is super easy and is honestly probably the weakest part. It's pretty straightforward with no real platforming challenges, and the only real challenge comes from some of the enemies, which are sometimes hard to attack because of what I said about the 3D space. This is a fun little romp that you'll be done with in about 10 or 20 minutes. It's nothing super impressive, but it's a fun little Donkey Kong museum. Made by the same guy, here's a mod that turns Whomps Fortress from Super Mario 64 into a Banjo-Kazooie level. A lot of things are where you'd expect them to be, but this hack still puts its own spin on the level. At first, I was really enjoying it. There's new music, basically taking Mario themes and recreating them in the Banjo-Kazooie sound font, as well as little Easter eggs hidden throughout the stage. To be honest, it seems like the game is dropping hints that Mario's running around naked somewhere. Whomp is already defeated, and in his place is Conga from Mumbo's Mountain, so I'm guessing he took Whomp out and usurped the throne. I was all ready to have a good time here because Whomps Fortress just so happens to be one of my favorite Super Mario 64 stages. Unfortunately though, there's a glaring issue here that upon first running into it, I gave the game another go, only to have it happen to me again, and then after that, I was donezo. Let me explain. See, in the original Banjo-Kazooie, if you die at any point before collecting all the notes, the game saves your note score, but if you want to collect every note, you need to go back and recollect all the notes you've already collected. Most seasoned Banjo-Kazooie players acknowledge this as one of the original game's shortcomings, which is why locations like the engine room from Rusty Bucket Bay are hated so much. Well, seeing as how this is built from the original Banjo-Kazooie, this issue is still present. Now, this can be avoided by having good level design. The less cheap deaths that can occur, the less this is bothersome. Unfortunately, in this mod, there's a really cool section where you go through level 1-2 from Super Mario Bros., complete with remade music and all. However, there's a really really obnoxious jump that if you miss, you fall into a bottomless pit and insta-death. Banjo has never been known for having super tight platforming, and this quickly becomes a problem. The first time I did it, I fell to my death and lost all 65 of the notes I collected. I tried once again, recollected the notes I lost, managed to this time make the jump, only to have to do the jump a second time, at which point I again fell to my death. This kind of situation turns what would be maybe a 20-minute playthrough into something that can quickly multiply numerous times over. And I gotta say, the novelty of the stage concept really wears off after you do the same thing multiple times in a row. I'd probably have different feelings about it if I was able to save state, but I'm playing on an actual N64 and I can't do that. This was a good effort, but I do not want to collect the same notes 1,200 times. Now, the modder who's responsible for the DKC mod, the Whomps Fortress mod, as well as the Banjo-Kazooie Wind Waker crossover I covered in a previous video, seems to like to do Banjo crossover hacks, oftentimes mixed with Zelda, and in this one, Banjo-Kazooie Gruntilda's Mask, Kurko Mods basically makes an entire Banjo-Kazooie stage out of Clocktown, complete with even a final day element, albeit super watered down when compared to the source material. Much like the Wind Waker mod I covered previously, this is not only a fully fledged stage in and of itself, but it has so much content packed into it that really its size and scope are comparable to multiple stages as opposed to just one. This one seems to take a little bit of a Metroidvania kind of approach. Instead of giving you all your abilities right at the start, you have to go through Clocktown finding the different molehills so that bottles can teach you all the moves. A lot of this mod's progression is gated behind having set abilities, and as you collect things and find more molehills, you gradually break open more and more areas. Like I said, this is super Metroidvania-y. Now this was a bit more confusing and a little harder to figure out than the Wind Waker one was, and actually did take more than a couple hours to finish. To be honest, I didn't even actually finish it because the mod ends with the Gruntilda fight from the original game and I kept dying on it, and that fight takes like 40 hours, so I figured at least getting to the final boss was enough. I did collect most things though, save for one note and one honeycomb piece. As is tradition with Kurko mods, this game features a lot of nice recreations of Zelda music, once again using the Banjo-Kazooie sound font, a lot of which sounded surprisingly better than I expected, given Majora's Mask's somber OST. Personally, I thought this was really good, but because of the nature of how progression is in this game, a lot of the time I sank into it was due to backtracking to different areas multiple times, as opposed to it just taking long because of sheer content. This was still really good though, and at least worth checking out. So I'm gonna start this one off by saying, despite it having some good things about it, my overall time with this mod called Banjo Threeie was ultimately tarnished. As you can see, the footage for this one looks entirely different, and that's because I had to use footage captured by someone else. Luckily, the creator of the other mods, not this one, Mark Kurko, has a playthrough of this one on his channel. After sinking multiple hours into this, I found myself in a bit of a pickle, and luckily he picked up the slack and told me I could use his footage. Basically, what happened was, after playing for about 3 hours, the game crashed as I was using jiggies to unlock a new stage. Because of this, my save file, as well as all of my footage, became corrupted. Hooray! So, as the title suggests, this is meant to take place after Banjo-Tooie. The game starts off with a very depressing version of Spiral Mountain, and Bottles explains that Grunty has come back as a ghost and is up to no good again. It's now Banjo and Kazooie's job to go through multiple new worlds to once again collect jiggies, notes, and honeycomb pieces. There's 100 jiggies to be found in this mod, as well as an entirely new hub world in the form of a museum that Grunty constructed directly behind her original lair. Having 100 jiggies, it's pretty meaty, but a lot of those jiggies are close together and very easily obtainable, so it's more condensed and not as fleshed out as something official. I don't really have that much to say about this one. It's pretty buggy and the camera fights you every step of the way, but this is still a decent try and it's moderately enjoyable. I wouldn't really say it lives up to the name it's been given, but it's overall relatively decent. Banjo-Kazooie: The Final Mission is a follow-up to the Banjo Threeie hack, but this one is quite dialed back. Most stages are extremely tiny, and in this one there aren't any jiggies, honeycombs, or mumbo tokens. Instead, the entire game's progression is based on collecting notes, of which 10 can be found per stage. I'm honestly not really sure how I feel about this one. There's parts I really like a lot, and then there's others that I think are extremely frustrating and annoying. This hack definitely has a good amount of clever ideas in it, and this one stage even has the Casino Night theme from Sonic 2 translated into, you guessed it, Banjo-Kazooie sound fun. Partway through the game, you fight Grunty's ghost, but it's not really what I'd call a fight. She's essentially just a throwaway enemy reskinned as Grunty. The real antagonist of this game is Nightmare, who at first seems like just a creepy and deranged version of Face from Nick Jr., but then later on, during the final boss fight, reveals himself to actually be a gigantic, terrifying spider. Speaking of that boss fight, it once again isn't really a fight. Now, this I actually thought was pretty cool. You do need to avoid his attacks, but you can't actually attack him yourself. Instead, you need to play defense as you make your way to a button on a platform that you need to depress without getting knocked into the lava. Doing this reveals a platform on the opposite side of the arena, which you can then use to access a flight pad to make your escape. This may sound weird, but I don't think it's a stretch to say this actually reminded me a lot of the Chthon boss fight from Quake 1. Sure, that one does end up with the boss being slain, but much like the Nightmare boss fight, you're not the one doing the damage. You're avoiding attacks while trying to access switches. It's also very similar to something like the final stage in Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Jr. I always thought that type of boss fight was clever and fun, and this is the same kind of idea, I think. When I first started playing this game, I thought this was going to be like a 20 or 30 minute little hack, but it turns out this actually took a good 2 hours. I don't think it's quite up to the quality that Kurko mods puts out, but it's definitely worth checking out at least. It's not amazing, but it's definitely got a decent amount of good ideas. Well, that's all for today. Honestly, if you like these kinds of mods, definitely keep an eye once again on Kurko Mods. He's done amazing work, and his mods often do feel pretty close to official stuff. He's got a bunch of other hacks that I haven't talked about here, so I'd definitely go check him out if this stuff seems interesting to you. I will leave a link to his channel in the description. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it and want to see more, there's a couple other videos right there you can check out. And if you want to see everything I upload, subscribe and then tap the bell icon. And I have a Patreon right there if you want to help support the channel.